So usually I don't make negative videos about people, but I think I need to make an exception in this case. So hopefully I can help you save your money. Since I lost my money, as you would have known in the last video. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to calculate your CRS score correctly so that your friendly neighborhood fraudulent consultant doesn't know what hit him when you next go to see him again. Make sure you stick around till the end because we're also going to reveal the 5 reasons your permanent residency application may get rejected. So this video is broken into 2 parts, and I would first recommend you go and see part 1 in case you missed it. In part 1, we assess your eligibility for the Express Entry and the Federal Skilled Worker Program. In fact, let's quickly do a review of part 1. For the Express Entry, there are 3 different stages that you have to go through before you reach your ITA, the golden ticket. So the first stage is to check your admissibility. So first you got to check if you're admissible. So do you have a past criminal record? Do you have any medical condition that may give the immigration officer a reason to deny your application? So once you have assessed that you're admissible and you check all the boxes, you then move on to stage 2. Stage 2 is nothing but the Federal Skilled Worker Program, or the FSWP as it's more commonly known as. In stage 2, it's pretty straightforward. Overall, you have 100 points. The passing mark is 67. If you score 67, congratulations, you have passed, and you move on to stage 3. So what is stage 3? Stage 3 is the comprehensive ranking score. So here comes the moment of truth. In the next stage, we're going to discuss the different elements that would comprise of your comprehensive ranking score. The human capital factors, in case you're married, the points your spouse are responsible for, your transferability points, and your bonus points. So let's begin. Stage 3 is the comprehensive ranking system. So what exactly is the comprehensive ranking system and how does the system actually work? So your Express Entry profile basically consists of age, your language, your education, and your skilled work experience. These factors are also known as your human capital factors. So after we calculate your age, your language, your education, and your skilled work experience, a score is determined and then an Express Entry profile is logged for you in the Express Entry pool. Now every 2 or 3 weeks there is a round of invitation. So if your profile is more than the draw, in that case congratulations, you receive your ITA, and in that case you proceed on to applying for your permanent residency. If you've scored less than the draw, your profile will remain in the pool for a period of at least 1 year. Once you receive your ITA, you basically have 3 months to submit your application. After submitting your applications, approximately another 6 months and Canada. So your CRS score basically comprises of 3 primary factors. A, your human capital factors. B, if you're married, your spouse's score will actually count towards your score. And C, which are your transferability factors. Now all these factors together would total up to a maximum of 600 points. Now let's talk about the human capital factors. If you're single, on the age parameter, the maximum score you can actually score is 110 points. If you're married, it's 100 points. Similarly, for your education, the maximum score you can score is, if you're single, 150 points, and if you're married, 140 points. Where your language is concerned, the maximum score you can actually score if you're single is 160 points, and if you're married, 150 points. And as for Canadian work experience, the maximum score you can score if you're single is 80 points, and if you're married, 70 points. Now, in case if you're married and your spouse decides to come along with you to Canada, so out of 500 points, basically 40 points from your profile gets transferred to your spouse. So out of these 40 points, for level of education, the maximum points you can score is 10 points. Where language is concerned, the maximum points to be scored would be 20. And if your spouse has any past Canadian work experience, the maximum score that can be scored there is 10 points. So this is the brief description of a comprehensive ranking score for a married couple. So as you can see, the human capital points that you can score maximum at 460, for which age would be 110 points, language 160 points,
education 150 points, and past Canadian work experience 80 points. The 40 points that are then transferred to your spouse are for education. Your spouse is responsible for getting 10 points. Or the language, if he or she gets a CLB 9, then that's a full 20 points. And of course 10 points for any past Canadian work experience. So the maximum score in the human capital points here is 500. Transferability factors. Now this section is one of the most important sections, and it actually determines if you are going to go to Canada or if you are not. So basically, under the education section, a good IELTS score, that is a CLB 9 plus a postgraduate degree, the maximum point you would score is 50. And again, a CLB 9 plus at least 3 years of foreign work experience will get you another 50 points. We'll be discussing this section a bit more in detail later on in the presentation. So if you can actually add all the 3 sections together, that is your human capital score, in case your spouse is coming along with you, and your transferability factors, the maximum point you would score is 600. So in case your spouse or partner is not coming along with you to Canada, or they are already Canadian citizens or permanent resident holders, in that case your profile will actually be assessed as a single individual and not as a married couple. Additional points, or bonus points as I would call it. So if you have a brother or sister living in Canada who is a citizen or maybe a permanent resident holder, you can score a maximum of 15 points. For your French language skills, the maximum score you can actually score here is 30 points. If you have any post-secondary education in Canada, again you can score 30 points. If you have arranged employment in Canada, again you score a maximum of 200 points. And in case if you have a provincial nomination in Canada, then again you score 600 points. So if we add the 4 sections together, A, that's the human capital section, B, if your spouse is coming along with you, C, the transferability factors, and D, the bonus points, the grand total and the maximum score you can actually get is 1,200 points. So now let's talk about each individual section in detail and actually see how it works. Now where age is concerned, if you're between 20 to 29 years old and you're single, you would score a full 110 points, whereas if you're married, it's 100 points. Post 29, for every additional year, you start losing 5 points. As you can see, at 30, if you're married, it comes down to 95. At 31, it comes down to 90. At 32, it comes down to 85, and so on, right up to 45 years or more, where you don't score any points. Educations. Now again, a tip out here, and this is something you must be aware. Usually if you have a bachelor's qualification, that is a minimum requirement that you need to have to immigrate to Canada. So for a bachelor's qualification, you would score 120 points if you're single, and if you're married, 112 points. But to score the maximum points on your transferability factors, remember we discussed when education you can get a maximum of 50 points. You need to at least have a postgraduate degree or a master's degree, or even better, a PhD. Language. And this is also one of the parts where most of the candidates have a fear barrier, as I call it. So for the language, you at least need to score a CLB 7. That's a 6 in all 4 proficiencies. That means in listening, reading, writing and speaking, you need to score a 6 at a minimum to qualify for the express entry. However, to get full points in the transferability factor, you at least need to score a CLB 9. That is a 8 in listening and a 7 in reading, writing and speaking. So say if you score a CLB 7 and you're single, in that case on each proficiency you would score 17 points. Whereas if you're married, on each proficiency you score 16 points. On the other hand, if you score a CLB 9 and if you're single, on each proficiency you score 31 points. Whereas if you're married, you score 29 points. So as discussed in the previous slide, a CLB 7 is nothing but a 6 on each ability. That is on speaking 6, listening 6, reading 6 and writing 6. Whereas a CLB 9, on listening you need to score a 8, on speaking, reading and writing would be a 7. Canadian work experience. So if you have past Canadian work experience of maybe a year And again, if you're single, you would then score 40 points, whereas if you're married, you would score 35 points. If you have 3 years of Canadian work experience, in that case, if you're single, you would score 64 points, whereas if you're married, you would score 56 points, and so on. The maximum points you can actually score in this section is if you have 5 years or more of experience in Canada. So if you're single, you then score 80 points, and if you're married, you score 70 points. Now, if you remember, we discussed earlier that 40 points of your profile gets transferred to your spouse. Now, out of the 40 points, 10 points are actually for education. So if your spouse has a master's qualification, in that case, he or she would score a full 10 points in this section. If they have a postgraduate qualification or maybe a double bachelor's degree, in that case, it's 9 points. If they have only a bachelor's degree, in that case, it's 8 points, and so on. So as you were aware, out of the 40 points that have been transferred to your spouse, 10 points are for the education section and 20 points are now for the language part. So if your spouse scores a CLB 9 or more, in that case, he or she would get a full 5 points in each ability. So that's a full 20 points. However, if he or she gets a CLB 7 or 8, in that case, it's only 3 points in each ability. That means they score only 12 points. As we discussed earlier, transferability factors are one of the most important sections in calculating your CRS score. And this section will basically determine if you would actually immigrate to Canada or if you're not. So as you can see, if your IELTS scores a CLB 9, that is, you've scored at least 8 on listening and 7 on reading, writing and speaking, and if you have a PhD or a master's or a double bachelor's or even a post-graduation degree, in that case you would score full 50 points on the education section of the transferability factors. Anything less than a post-graduation degree, maybe a bachelor's, in that case you only score 25 points. Staying with transferability factors, this time it's the foreign work experience. Again, if you have a CLB 9 and you have 3 years of foreign work experience, in that case you would score a full 50 points. However, if you have anything less than a CLB 9 and 3 years of work experience, you end up getting only 25 points. So again, I cannot stress the importance of getting at least a CLB 9 on your IELTS score. Now this is actually one of your first tips, and this is where a cricket consultant would cheat you by telling you that you don't need a CLB 9 or you don't need an 8777 to immigrate to Canada. Even if you have something less than 8777, you would still immigrate to Canada. Later on in the presentation, I'll actually be doing a live presentation on how to calculate the CRS score. And from that you will see that given the current CRS score trend, right now we're in the month of August 2020, where the CRS score is actually in the high 470s, anything less than a CLB 9, there is a good chance that you may not immigrate to Canada. So now we come to section D, which are the additional points or the bonus points as I call them. So if you have a brother or sister living in Canada who is either a citizen or a permanent resident holder, in that case you can score a maximum of 15 points. If you have a post-secondary education in Canada with the credential of 1 to 2 years, in that case again you can score 15 points. If your post-secondary education in Canada is 3 years or longer, in that case you actually end up with 30 points. If you have an arranged employment in the NOC code 00, in that case you score 200 points. If you have an arranged employment in NOC 0A or B, in that case you score 50 points. For a PNP nomination, you would score 600 points.
So now you know what you didn't know earlier. Now let's take a look how to calculate your CRS score correctly.
So let's calculate the CRS score right now and see what is your CRS score. To calculate your CRS score, what you want to do is come on to Google and type in Express Entry CRS tool. After you hit enter, you want to select the first option, which is from the Canadian immigration website. That's cic.gc.ca, and here it says CRS tool. So you click on this option. Now scroll down a bit and there's a bunch of questions you actually need to answer this is where you begin calculating your score. So the first question it will ask you is, what is your marital status? So for this example, let's consider my profile as an example. So I am married. Is your spouse a common law partner, a citizen or permanent resident of Canada? No, she is not. Will your spouse or common law partner come with you to Canada? Let's do a yes now and see what. In fact, let's do a no now. You can change this later. How old are you? I am 38 years old. And what is your level of education? Well, my highest qualification is a bachelor's. Have you earned a Canadian degree, diploma or a certificate? No, I have never earned one. It then talks about your official language. So are your test results less than 2 years old? Yes, they are. Which language test did you take for your first official language? I have taken the IELTS. What did you score on the IELTS? Well, on listening I scored an 8 and a 7 on the other 3 abilities. Do you have another language results? I don't speak French, so I don't have another language result. In the last 10 years, how many years of skilled work experience in Canada do you have? Well, I have no work experience in Canada. In the last 10 years, how many total years of foreign work experience do you have? Well, I have more than 3 years. Do you have a certificate of qualification from a Canadian province, territory or federal body? Nope, I don't think I have. Do you have an LMI? I don't have an LMI. Do you have a nomination certificate from a province? I wish I did, but that's a no. Do you or your spouse have at least one brother or sister living in Canada who is a citizen or a permanent resident? I think I have a cousin, but I don't have a real brother or sister, so that would be a no. So then, calculate score. So as you can see, on the age factor I've scored 61 points. For education I scored 120. Where language is concerned, I scored 124, which is pretty good. So hence, out of 500, my human capital score is 305. That's not very good. Going on the transferability factors, on the official language and education I scored 25 points. So that's 25. And on work experience I score 50 points. So 25 and 50, that's 75 out of 100 which I've scored. Hence, my human capital factors plus my transferability factors, my total score is a grand total of 380. At this point of time, but again, we are in the month of August 2020. The last IT was 470 plus. So this is where your friendly crooked consultant would actually come in and tell you, oh Mr. X, you scored only 380, but don't worry. What we are going to do is we're going to get you a provincial nomination, and I can guarantee you in about 6 to 8 months or maximum 1 year, you will get a PNP. So if you get a PNP, this option from no becomes yes, and now we recalculate scores. So this is what is shown. So as you know, with a grand total of 980, you will surely get a 90A. So Mr. X, when can I expect your payment and your money in my account? So this is something you need to be very, very careful of, because remember, a PNP nomination is not something that is guaranteed. There is a process, there is a procedure. Very soon we will be coming up with videos on PNP also, and the different PNPs via the express entry stream. But no one can actually guarantee you that you're going to get a PNP in 3 months or 6 months, 9 months or 1 year. Excuse my language, but that's a load of bullshit. This is where you guys need to be very, very careful, especially while visiting your friendly crooked consultant.
Remember, even a small mistake may cost you your chance of emigrating to Canada. So what I'm going to share with you is the top 5 reasons why your express entry application may get refused. These are one of the most common reasons why people's express entry applications would get rejected. Follow this list and be very detailed in what you are doing. What I can guarantee you is at least these 5 reasons will not be a cause for your rejection. The first reason, your reference letter is incomplete or missing information. As discussed in my earlier video on how to prove your work experience, which is also in the link above, your reference letter has to be complete, and more importantly, you must have a reference letter. It has to contain all that we talked about in the video. There are people who take chances thinking that a shortcut might work since their friends have got through. Guys, do not make this mistake, and hence, this is my number one reason on my list. The second reason, your police clearance certificate is missing. Now remember, a police clearance certificate is required for any country that you may have lived for more than 6 years in the last 10 years. The police clearance certificate is usually valid for 6 months. The third reason, proof of funds. Especially if you have not provided a letter from the bank as requested by the Canadian government. Again, we have covered this in our video, how to prove your funds. You need to be sure if you have borrowed money from a family member, you have made a gift deed. The fourth reason, your documents have expired. Now, this is very common. That's after you submit a profile, you get your ITA and you forget that things like your medical certificate, your police clearance certificate, your language test, your ECA report, they all have an expiry date. And if they are too old, it results in the application getting rejected. The fifth reason, you missed the deadline date to submit your documents. You may have received an email from IRCC on your My CIC portal, which you just missed, or the message may have gone to your junk folder. I can assure you that in the past, we have been hired by a substantial number of clients since they don't want this to happen to them. Clients pay us for their peace of mind, so we do all the tracking and respond to your queries, especially in cases of deadlines. Immigrating to Canada via the express entry can sometimes be a ruthless process. If you have not complied with the response to provide the documents within the given time frame, and you don't upload it on time or give some other reasons to request an extension, you can lose out on your opportunity. Sometimes the deadline they give you are extremely short. So that's the list. These are the top reasons. That's your reference letter, your police clearance certificate, your proof of funds, your documents that may have expired, and the dreaded missed deadline date. Thanks for joining me. If you could drop a like to let YouTube know that my video was decent, that would really help me a lot. And also I would appreciate if you could click on the subscribe button that's below and drop in some of your comments, some of your experiences with your friendly neighborhood fraudulent consultant in the comment section below. In case you'd like to book me for a consult on how to apply for the Express Entry program, you may do so by clicking on the link in the description box below. I'll see you in the next one.